公益分享会系列的第5期，我们要聊的主题是公立学校那些你不知道的事儿。过去几期我们分享过如何培养孩子的写作兴趣，孩子已经会自然拼读了，为什么还是不能自主阅读？我们也邀请过家长们来分享他们申请私立学校的经验和心得。我们也邀请过语言矫正师和儿童行为分析师。来和大家分享关于语言矫正、情绪管理相关的一些话题。那今天呢，我们是请到了 Miss Erica 校长来和我们分享一些关于公立学校的一些话题。在分享会之前呢，我们有做过一个问题的投票。那今天会针对大家投票最多的几个问题，给予比较全面的一个解答。那如果大家有一些其他的问题呢，也欢迎在我们的 chat box 聊天室里打出来。如果希望匿名的话，大家私发给我也可以。我们等一下会在 Q&A 的环节为大家来解答。那我特别想说一下，就是大家不用觉得自己的问题太小，不好意思问。像今天早上有一位家长私信我，他说妮娜老师快过节了，给老师的这个 gift card 不知道多少面值比较合适。我相信类似的问题很多家长其实都遇到过。那像我们一星球教育虽然是给孩子提供线上课程的机构，但是大家平时也看到，像我们小陆老师，他真的是每周二、每周四，他都非常非常精心的在准备，家长们可能会需要的一些资源，在群里进行分享。那我们每个月呢也定期举办这样的分享会，就是因为我们知道，作为华人家长，在一个和自己的这个成长背景、文化不一样的地方来抚养孩子，加上我们英语并不是第一语言，平时肯定会有很多很多像我刚才提到的类似的小问题，那更不要提说孩子的一个大的成长规划，他的社交，他各个方方面面的一些培养了。那我们一星球教育呢，也是希望不仅能给孩子提供学习上的帮助，也能够搭建这样一个让大家很放心的可以来沟通，放心的问问题，缓解大家焦虑的一个平台。好，那接下来，今天因为有一些新朋友哈，我还是快速的给大家介绍一下一星球。一星球教育是创办于美国加州，我们是主要为学龄前和小学阶段的孩子来提供最优质的语言和学科类的在线课程的一个教育机构。那这个图片上的 Learning Intended (LIT) 是我们独创的一个联动教育的理念，因为我们认为孩子的成长它不光是单向的，或者说个体的，它需要我们学校、老师、还有孩子以及家人整个家庭以及家长一起像这个骑多人自行车一样，一起联动来前行，才能让这辆车跑得更快。那我们一星球呢？我们是很尽力的想在选择北美最优质的老师，就我们称之为是 EPK 标准，那给大家提供一个超小班和量身定制化的课程服务。我们具有自己的课程研发团队，那对标的是美国私校的课程体系的。那目前我们在开的课程有幼儿美语、自然拼读、分级阅读、新加坡数学、分级写作、西班牙语、情绪管理课程。同时我们也提供私校申请的辅导、面试辅导和家庭教育相关的服务。好的，那接下来我们就正式进入今天的分享会。
Hi, everybody. My name is Erica Vassis. I have been in education for 20 years. I have my master's of science in education, along with a bachelor degree in fine art, and I have my certification in education leadership. I have been a building administrator, either an assistant principal or principal, for 7 years. And I have taught from kindergarten all the way to middle school in different subjects, different schools in different countries. I've had the honor to teach in Korea, in Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And I believe that education is the great equalizer, and it should provide our students with an even playing field for a productive future. talk about some of the extra support and resources that parents can get from the school and from the school district. And there's a lot, and especially if somebody's a new parent, a kindergarten parent, or a pre-K parent, you may not know all of the terms and all of the supports that public schools do offer. So the first is an individual education plan, and it's usually called an IEP. Speech services are also offered along with ELL services for English language learners, and gifted and talented programs, behavior support. Most schools, almost all schools, have a counselor, and then summer school is also offered. So first, we're going to talk about the IEP plan. So students can be placed on an IEP in order to receive extra support and services. The process which a student is placed on an IEP can vary from district to district and state to state. But as you can see from this slide, the usual process is a pre-referral where the parents and the school work together and they try to offer extra supports within the general education classroom. And then if teachers and data and everybody is agreeing that there's something impeding a student's progress, then they'll make a referral to a team to look at it a little bit more closely. And the parent is involved in this process as well. And then there follows an evaluation and an IEP meeting. And then once that meeting takes place, then the implementation of the IEP is put into effect. And the IEP is reviewed every year. Now, the one thing we want to make sure people know, though, is an IEP is not something to be afraid of. An IEP is put into place if the student needs extra support. Students on IEPs, it can look different in different schools, in different states, in different districts, and depending on the level of need. Some students will just be pulled out to another classroom for one subject or 40 minutes a day to get some extra support, or sometimes another teacher will come into the classroom to help them. It's very individualized, thus the name, the Individualized Education Plan. Okay, and we also have speech services, and that's a big one because a lot of times if you're feeling that your child is not always understanding what they're reading or forgetting information quickly, often it can be a speech concern. And usually people think speech is just how we talk, but it's also how we process information. Usually almost all schools have a speech pathologist, or they can bring one in to serve students, but it is good if you're seeing something at home to talk to your child's teacher about it, and you can suggest speech too. And again, it's not always how they talk. A lot of times people think speech is just a speech impediment or a stutter or a lisp, but it's not always that. And the speech pathologist has a lot of information on how to help students. So they're a really, really important part of our school community. And then we also have behavior supports in a lot of schools. Not all of them have this, but most schools that I've worked in have this. They can be called a behavior coach, a behavior technician. Sometimes they're called a behavior monitor. But they can help support students who need extra help learning how to function in school. They can teach coping skills to small groups. They can teach communication. They can teach friendship groups. And they often support the classroom teacher. And they also help. We have a behavior intervention plan, and it's called a BIP. And if a teacher or somebody else is having trouble with behavior, managing behavior of a student, we work together almost just like we do for an IEP. A team comes together to discuss the student and the issues we're seeing, and we come up with a plan to follow to help see the behavior improve. And then English language learner program as well. So this can look different in different schools and different districts as well. So often there'll be, depending on the level of support. So sometimes the student will get pulled out of class to work with the EL teacher, and they'll either work in small groups or one-on-one, or sometimes the EL teacher will push into the class and work with them in their own classroom. Now, usually the EL services are dependent on the home language survey. Not always, there can be other ways, but usually districts send home a home language survey at the beginning of the year. And that's the determination for EL services usually depends on the results of that survey. And the Wida assessment is given, it can be called different things in different states, but the general assessment called the Wida Assessment, and that is given to EL learners yearly to gauge their progress and determine whether they don't need the supports anymore or need more supports. Have the gifted and talented programs, which can be called different things in different school districts and states. But students are given an assessment to determine their eligibility for this program. And the test is similar to an IQ test. It really is assessing how students think rather than just focusing on what they know. So there's different ways. In some schools, students are clustered with other gifted students in the gen ed classroom. And then in that class, the teacher will give them different work. They'll have a lot of more project-based assignments and things like that. And sometimes they get pulled out to work with the gifted teacher on different things. There are some schools that have a specific program for students, so they have a gifted class. And then there's some places that even have a whole gifted school, depending on your gifted numbers and how the district manages it. And then the school counselor is another important person in our school system. Usually in the elementary schools, they look very different than a high school counselor. High school counselor, they're always working on like college readiness, but in an elementary school, usually the counselor's first job is working on the testing program, but they also visit classrooms, they do small group lessons, they provide our families with resources, they have resources to share and all that kind of stuff. So the counselor is a really, really important person in the elementary school system. And then we also have summer school programs, and usually our summer school programs are made for students who need remediation or extra support. We also have an EL program for summer school to help our newcomers learning English through the summer so they're even better prepared for the next school year. And often space is limited in summer school. So if you have the opportunity to go to summer school, usually you have to jump on it very quickly because the spots do fill up quite fast. Differentiation, and this is my favorite, and I'm very excited to get to talk to parents about differentiation because it is at the core of good and meaningful teaching. And I love this quote that it's both valuing and planning for diverse student needs in the classroom. Teachers don't just magically know what to teach and how to teach it. They use the PLC process, and this is where they meet in teams, and usually they'll meet weekly, and they answer these 4 questions about each big rock skill they're teaching. So they ask, what do we expect our students to learn? How will we know they're learning? How will we respond if they don't learn? And how will we respond if they already learn it? No, there is no way every student in that classroom has the same skill set. There's just, as much as you try to organize your classes like that, you can't. So teachers have to differentiate, and they'll use data to determine which students need remediation, which students need acceleration, and which need reteaching. So the classroom might look like this next slide in a differentiated classroom. I know for a lot of us, when we were in school or in different countries and different places, often the teacher just stands at the front of the room and everybody's just listening and writing down the exact same thing at the exact same time. But in most US classrooms, it's going to look like this. There's usually a teacher table going on where skills are being retaught or accelerated depending on the student's needs. There's students working independently. And if you can see in that picture, there's actually a second teacher in the room. And that teacher might be an EL teacher. She might be the gifted teacher. She might be a teacher's assistant. She might be the behavior monitor, but she's being used to help meet those students' needs as well. How do I communicate with my child's teacher? This is a really, really good one. First, usually all teachers have a communication policy. So I would ask about that. Often they'll use various methods of communication. They can use email, Facebook pages, Class Dojo. Usually they use those. So when you're communicating with your child's teacher, ask them specific questions. Because sometimes if you just ask, how is my child doing? The teacher, sometimes it's very broad. So if you can ask specific questions, that's really, really helpful. In the classroom, I used to use the sandwich method. So we usually start with something positive, and then we'll get to whatever we're seeing that might be a difficulty or a deficit or something to work on. So maybe the more negative piece goes in the middle, and then we try to finish with something positive. So it's important because sometimes people don't hear the bad part in the middle. And the other piece too is just being careful not to overwhelm a teacher. Okay, and then who should I talk to? This is a good one because there's often so many people in the school and you don't know who to talk to for what. You can talk to your teacher, your child's teacher, about any general inquiry about their progress, their homework, curriculum, assessments, classroom expectations, special activities, events, or projects. Sometimes schools have more than one secretary. I've been in schools that have had 3 secretaries or more. So usually one of those secretaries is an attendance secretary. And that's that first person you'll see when you come into the building. She should know the schedules, the events, the policies, information on PTA, routines, and logistics. Usually the attendance secretary knows what's going on, or she will find out. And then usually there's the principal secretary. They'll know a little bit more about like assessment dates, report cards, testing schedules, and that kind of thing. Usually the principal secretary has all that information. And again, the counselor, you can talk to the school counselor about anything. Again, like I said, if your family is going through a struggle, do not be shy to talk to the counselor. The counselors keep things confidential unless somebody needs to know to be able to help, but you can always talk to the counselor if, like I said, if somebody passed away or if there's a divorce. And then the principal, you can talk to us about anything. If you have concerns, suggestions, feedback, or ideas, we like that as well. And then a nurse, there's usually a school nurse or a health aide, and you can talk to them about anything or just about medical issues as well. And what type of volunteer work can I do if my English is limited? And we love our volunteers in school. You can offer to do like office items for your child's teacher. This is a big one, like photocopying or cutting, especially if your child's in like kindergarten or first grade or second grade. A lot of teachers do a lot of those cute laminated things, and it takes a lot of cutting. State testing monitors are also needed, and it doesn't matter if you're not 100% comfortable with, speaking English, and that's okay, because we just need somebody in there to help monitor the students. You could do, oh my goodness, cultural activities would be amazing. I know it would have been amazing to have a volunteer come in who's experienced that and been able to share that with our students. They love learning about different cultures and different countries and different traditions. Last but not least is discrimination. So if you are concerned with any kind of discrimination of any kind, talk to your child's teacher immediately. Most districts have a discrimination policy which they follow, but if you feel like you're not getting the answers or the support you need, go to the principal, because we do take that very serious.
这里也给大家简单介绍一下，我们现在有一些免费的公开课，大家如果感兴趣的话可以扫。如果对我们的课程不了解的话，也可以扫这个右下方的这个小助手二维码去进行一些咨询。我们的课程有像自然拼读、阅读、写作，大家如果感兴趣的话都可以来咨询。
我们今天的讲座呢，也会剪辑一下放在我们的 YouTube 的频道上，然后也会通过我们的公众号文章和视频号来做分享。那关于下一期讲座的主题呢，也希望家长们能够在群里告诉我们你们对什么样的问题比较关注，我们可以就公立学校再做一些其他话题的分享。我们也可以分享一些家长对于公立啊、私立学校择校方面的一些考虑，或者是其他育儿方面的一些话题都可以。即使是我们办过的一些讲座的内容，大家如果感兴趣的话，我们也可以再开的。今天非常非常感谢大家来参加。